Hello, my name is Matt Hadley, lead pastor at Clatskanie Community Church. I've been involved in ministry for almost or over 25 years, from youth ministry, worship ministry, now lead pastor, and everything in between. And I'm just excited to spend these next couple moments with you, encouraging you and just going over what the Lord's put on my heart. So let's get into it. I'm excited to speak on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, something that I've just recently gone through, and that's transitioning in a leadership role and doing so with grace. And so that's the topic of this teaching, transitioning with grace. Just a brief story, or just kind of to let you know my journey to this point. I've been at the church I'm at for 20 years. So I came here as a youth pastor and as a worship leader. And I was very young. My wife and I were raising a family. And so I was really enjoying that season of ministry. About 10 years into my ministry, I decided to go back to school. I just felt like God had something more for me. And this is a pretty typical pattern for pastors. Not to say that all youth pastors move on to lead positions, but it's pretty standard. And so I've kind of felt that calling on my life and went back to school. And in that time here at the church, the pastor that had hired me was looking to retire. He was getting towards the end of his career. And naturally, there was kind of some, perhaps, at least in the background, some conversation about transitioning, maybe me moving into the lead role as he retired. And that wasn't the case. He actually wasn't of that mind. And so things got a little more challenging as I was going to school and spreading my wings a little more. And it just became quickly very unhealthy. And it was just a real challenging time. He did end up retiring, but in a way that it was just, it didn't lend itself to a real graceful transition. All of that said, is there's kind of a lot left in the rubbles of that transition. The church decided, even though I put my name in to transition into the lead role, they chose someone else. And so that was a really challenging and difficult time. I'll just be honest. I kind of wanted to, just kind of pick up and move and do my own thing, because it seemed, why wouldn't my church that I've put 10, 12 years into and gone back to school and really invested not want to hire me and see me transition into the lead role? And so we hired a lead pastor who came in, and at the time, I knew that pretty confidently that I wanted to transition into the lead role at some point, whether it be here or somewhere else. And I had that conversation with the new pastor, and that was the best decision I could have made. And he also knew my story. He knew what he was coming into, and it just set the trajectory of our relationship, and also what would inevitably become the transition from me to the lead role, just real smooth and something that was really beautiful. And so we had that conversation, and it was another 8 to 9 years until I finally here just last year transitioned into the lead role. So it's been a long journey, and I've seen both sides of transition done well, and I've seen it done also very, very poorly. And also, if you're around other ministry leaders from organizations or within the church, inevitably pretty much everyone has been through a bad transition, whether they directly were transitioning or they've seen it and they were part of the shrapnel and the kind of the falling out of a bad transition. So there's a few things that I would just like to highlight, maybe as an encouragement to anyone who's going through a transition at your organization, or maybe you're a pastor and looking to transition. Just some encouragement on how best to set yourself up for success, as well as your congregation or your church or your organization. So when transitioning with grace, I think it's something we all desire. We all want to do it the best way possible. I believe that, especially as followers of Jesus, we want to see it done well. I believe that God desires for us to transition well, but what does that really look like and what does that mean? Well, there's several things that I'll submit to you. The first is this, that we transition with humility. Transitions that I've seen done poorly is when pride gets the best of us. And it's so easy to do. We can easily let our desires or how we feel, or just the fairness of something or unfairness of something else, or the hurt from people's words. I mean, there's just so much that can become a barrier in transitioning with grace. And so humility, though it's kind of a buzzword, it really is the foundation of transitioning with grace. Proverbs 22:4 says, true humility and fear of the Lord lead to riches, honor, and a long life. Sure, it's talking about humility within, just the scope of life, but I would say you could apply that to having humility in transition. If we truly fear the Lord and what he desires, it's going to lead to what your heart desires as well, as long as that's aligned. And then also, there's the passage in Philippians that I just love, in Philippians 2, and starting in verse 3, it says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't only look to your own interests, but take an interest in others too. And honestly, that right there could be the mission statement for any transition. That if you truly are looking to the other, whether you're transitioning in or transitioning out, that really is the heart of God. Don't be selfish. Don't hold on to things that aren't yours to hold on to. Be humble. Think about others as more than yourself. If you're doing those things, then the process of transition should be one of grace. It should be simple. It should be maybe not simple all the time, but it should be done in a way that honors the Lord. And then it goes on to say just having the mind of Christ and how he demonstrated for us and gave us the example of what humility looks like, even all the way to the cross, that he was willing to die on the cross for us. So such an amazing reminder. Be humble. So transition starts with humility. Also, the next one is transition with honor. Transition with honor. It's not something in our culture that we esteem highly. We kind of are about ourselves. There isn't much honor in how we deal with one another. So it might be something that we don't think about all the time, but honor is an extremely important thing to the Lord. In Romans 12:10, it says, love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. And actually that idea of delighting in is like kind of outdo one another. Do it more than someone's doing it to you. Try to honor someone so much that maybe they get sick of you, but that's okay. Because we want to delight in honoring one another out of genuine affection. So it's not made up. It's not like, I'm just going to put on a face. I'm going to act like I'm honoring them. I'm going to come up with a nice speech in front of people to honor them. But really in my heart, I don't really believe those words. That's not what it's saying. It's saying with a genuine affection, with love and care for them, take delight in honoring each other. So that means practically, think of ways that you can celebrate and appreciate the one that you perhaps are replacing, or vice versa. If you are transitioning out and someone's coming in, how can you honor them? How can you delight in the giftings that they have? And one thing that I learned about honor that's really important is to be aware of the excitement that we might have in the future of leading a church. For myself, I have a lot of ideas and thoughts that the pastor that I replaced didn't necessarily have. And so I was excited. I was excited for the newness. I was excited for, being able to put out there the things that God has put in me. And yet I had to make sure that I didn't always talk about that or speak of it in front of other people, because in a way, and it seems silly, but in a way, it can somewhat dishonor all that the one that I'm replacing has done and what he has put out there. I'm not saying you can't talk about the future at all, but just be mindful. How are you discussing the future? Like, boy, when I get in charge, I'm going to change this and this. It can be kind of a back way that shows dishonor to those in leadership before you. So just be mindful. Honor is not just in how you talk about someone or how you appreciate them in front of others, but it's also how you map the future along with what they have done. And so just be mindful of those things. The third area of transition is doing it with understanding and compassion. Do it with understanding and compassion, primarily of the person. Okay, if it's going to be with humility and honor of this other person, understand where they're coming from. If you are transitioning out, be excited for what's in them and what God's going to do through them. Oftentimes, and I can say for the first go around of transition, there wasn't an excitement. It was more of a bitterness towards the opportunity or possibility of me stepping into this position. And so there wasn't a whole lot of understanding or compassion as to where I was in my in my career, or what God has put on my heart, or even all of those different conversations that could have been had, but just weren't. And so I would just encourage you, understand and have compassion for where the other person is. The second transition, when I took over lead pastor, I was trying to put myself in his shoes. What would it feel like? What does it look like to move on from something you've done for, he had been doing pastoral work for 40 plus years, if not more. And so he had put so much effort into this, so much time into this. And if you're not a pastor yourself, or familiar with what that feels like, perhaps more than any other calling or any other job, it's not a 9 to 5. Your identity and purpose is the position you are. And that's found in other walks of life as well, and other jobs, but specific to a pastoral calling, there is just this, you're never off. You just are always a pastor in every area of your life, home, in the church, in the community. And to do that for 40 plus years and then one day just say, well, I'm not a pastor anymore, that has to be overwhelming. And to have compassion and understanding as to what that might feel like, I think is really important. The person that I took over, I'd ask him every now and again how he was doing, and he would be, oh, I'm fine. But I always wanted to push past that because I knew it wasn't just fine. And he couldn't always articulate his feelings around that in the moment, which is okay and totally understandable, but be mindful, be understanding, and be compassionate around those, who you're transitioning with, either on the way out or coming in. The fourth one is transition with God's blessing. And I understand, you're like, okay, well, great, God's blessing. Like, how do I know it's God's blessing? Is it just a, oh moment? No, not necessarily. I think what we can do is we can lean into several different indicators that it's God's blessing. If you have a leadership team, are they all in alignment for this transition? Do they believe that this is good for the church? It's good for those involved. It's good for the organization. Do they fully believe that the one transitioning in is capable and called by God? I think that'll give you a lot of indicators. Is it healthy? Are people doing it with a spirit of humility? And are they doing it with a heart that's aligned with what God wants and not what they want? So those are, I get it. You need discernment and wisdom for that, but that's something we can ask God for in the process. The other thing is, how about the organization itself? From my standpoint, the church. I've been here 20 years, and so my transition was fairly easy in that way. The congregation is very comfortable with me, and they recognized that I was growing in my skill sets and in my passions and desires to grow and to ultimately be a lead pastor. And so they saw that coming. It wasn't a big shocker when we came to them and said, "Hey, Matt's going to be the new lead pastor. What do you think?" There's only really positive feedback on that. But that said, I think if there's red flags, or there's people saying, bringing concerns or different things about the transition, it's wise to consider that. Some of it's just because they don't like people, or, there's other reasons why, but I think it's at least worthy of a pause and say, is this right for right now? For me, it wasn't right for the moment, the first time, but it was for the second. So do so with God's blessing. There's a lot of different indicators. Obviously, fasting, prayer, just seeking the Lord to make sure that He's leading it and not you. And then lastly, there's transition with a plan. This is somewhat of an idea that's not very common. Within churches, especially if you would to ask, and we're seeing a big transition from baby boomers to the next generation of lead pastors, and most churches do not have a plan of succession. They don't have a transition plan. And so ultimately they're either stuck at the end of, a pastor's career and they have no one to take their place, or they maybe had someone who was qualified and yet the senior pastor wasn't ready to transition or wasn't thinking about it at the time. And that pastor then went somewhere else. And here they're stuck now without a pastor. They got to call a new pastor, which is okay. But boy, if you had someone that you had trained or that was ready to step into the next spot, what a benefit, to keep continuity, to keep just the excitement of what was going on and what God was doing in that church and just the vision of the church. Going for generations to come. I can only see the benefits if we think this way. So have a clear plan. If you have a plan, make sure that it's set up to be smooth for both the one going out as well as the one coming in, that it's clear, that there's good communication between those that are transitioning, the church board, and also the congregation, that no one's left in the dark or wondering what's going on, but that it's just very clear and succinct, that they understand what the process is. There might be some tough conversations to have when you do it that way, but it's the best practice, I believe. In my experience, it was so helpful when our pastor came in and we had that conversation of, I want to be a lead pastor. And so from that point forward, for the 9 years that he was here, we just operated with that mentality. And then when we got to the actual, working out the details of how I was going to transition, it was very natural. It was very much, this has been coming. We've been talking about this. Here's the timeline. Here are the steps. Here's when we talk to the congregation. Here's how we do things behind the scenes. Like all of the details work themselves out. It was so smooth and I believe God honoring. So it was just an amazing thing. So I don't know your situation. I don't know if you are transitioning in a season of transition into a new role, or maybe you're in a season of transitioning out. Can I just encourage you to guard your heart? Guard your heart against bitterness, of anger, of the things that we so naturally can be bent towards. And that's humanity, right? That's how we can kind of tend to respond and act in certain situations. But can I just encourage you, if you're willing to submit yourself to the Lord and willing to just be humble, even when it's so challenging, there's going to be things said, there's going to be slights, there's going to be words or looks or people that just aren't considerate. But if you can set that aside and just focus on what the Lord's doing, I'll just say it is such a beautiful thing. I could have run after the first transition, gone terrible. Someone else was hired. I thought I was going to be moving into the lead pastor role. It just made perfect sense. I'm done with school. I'm prepared. I'm ready. And here they hire someone else. And I could have said, you know what? I'm done. And I could have moved on. But I believe from the bottom of my heart that the Lord was teaching me something in the midst of that frustration and difficulty. And if I had just gone somewhere else, I would have had to learn the same lesson somewhere else. But God said, no, stay here. Learn, be mentored, and the transition will come, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And I can agree with what God was telling me back then was true. It has been a wonderful transition. So that's my encouragement to you in this teaching. And I'm praying for you that this is a smooth transition for you as well. God bless.